So we did Matthew the second week on Sunday. Big passage, like tons of
You're not wrong.
Yeah. It was a 5-pointer.
I know. I felt a bit strange doing a 5-point sermon. Felt very reformed evangelical of myself. It was big. I think on reflection, I reckon it was probably 2 talks worth of material, and so I was pretty happy to be done under an hour. But yes, I think coming off last week and kind of really establishing that God had a plan from the beginning, and that plan is not thwarted by human problems and weakness, really set us up into the birth narrative and then the early years of Jesus and kind of the chess piece movements of how God is orchestrating his plan through seemingly like chaotic and different events. That was, I think it was really helpful coming out of last week's passage into this week's passage, holding on to that God is in control thread. That was big. A little bit overwhelmed. We had a bunch on this weekend with different, like presbytery, and had a different assembly meetings and stuff. And so I was in this intense mindset, and then we hit this massive passage, and that was really fun. I had heaps of fun. And it was only 38 minutes, which
not too bad.
I was worried it was going to be like 45, but we got through. Even that was at a reasonably fast pace, all the way through.
Yeah, what was it like for you, like diving into the different connections and in a sense coming in on Sunday, going, I'm going to try and pull this all the threads together for us. Yeah, what was that like? Trying to tap into Matthew, what's he doing for? Like, why is he throwing us in the deep end in this dense, rich Old Testament?
So the thing that got me when I was looking at the passage was there's this little bit about Rama and Rachel, and I got really confused because I was like, hang on, Rachel and Rama are different on the timeline. Rachel's heaps earlier, kind of like
Genesis.
Early Genesis. Rama's kind of exile, and so at that point I went, oh, hang on, Matthew is like, he's a biblical theologian. He's actually not willing just to tell us a simple story as it unfolds. He's really wanting us to understand how this story about Jesus fits into God's big picture of redemption from the very beginning. And it's not just like, oh, here's a proof text of something that happened a couple of thousand years ago. It's like, here's 1,000 years ago image, but I want you to read that in the context of a 2,000 or 3,000 year old image. And I expect you to do the heavy lifting as you're reading it. And so I like that because I love kind of getting into the text. I love playing with I like biblical theology, thinking through how things work in the context of God's big story. And so, I just felt like Matthew threw the gauntlet down, and I kind of had a bit too much fun picking that up and chasing rabbit holes and playing with fun ideas. I found that was really, really fun to just play with through the week.
Yeah, some pretty rich, deep images to throw in there for us. In a way that's maybe we're used to kind of more familiar, typically handle Old Testament prophecies that are predictive, that clearly kind of point to something that only the Messiah could fulfill. But some of these connections are actually not explicit predictions of here's the Messiah who's going to come, but he's actually more, like you said, drawing on an event, a scenario, and then kind of going, hey, this is replaying here in this moment. And the Messiah is the one who's now going to unfold the full story and the true fulfillment in that sense.
I found it really weird that, so in Matthew 1:16, he says Jesus is the Messiah. He also says in Matthew 1:1, this is the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah. And so he's stated plainly, Jesus is the Messiah. And then he's gone, but don't just take my word for it. Let me actually show you from church history, from the Old Testament, from the very beginning. And here's my exploration of how Jesus is the Messiah. And he covers 3,000 years in 23 verses. And he's not satisfied just to say, here's the Messiah because here's one prophecy that he fulfills. Like he ticks off exile, the Exodus, his kingship, his sonship. And like, I'm jealous of the way that he's just so succinct in presenting information that's got just, this rich background. I think the thing that I was challenged by this week is that there's so much that Matthew is presupposing of the reader. Yeah. And so I was like, I was encouraged that, right, I actually need to, read the plain reading of the text. There's nothing wrong with just reading Matthew's gospel. You still meet Jesus. You still see how he is the Messiah, the one who died, the one who rose again, the one who saves us from our sins. But he's also a gateway to actually exploring all of church history, exploring all of God's redemptive plan from the beginning. And I love how, like, you can take it or you can leave it. You still understand it in its simplicity, but there's a depth and richness that's just sitting beneath the surface. Which I like. I love. It's so good. So yeah, I'm pretty excited to be back in Matthew. What about yourself? What struck you from the passage?
That's the experience I've had the last week, sort of sitting with the text as well. Like, remember when we first read it together, and the Rachel Rama one was the one we've got to nut out what's going on in that spot. I've had a lot of joy actually just going back and sitting in Jeremiah 31. I think that was my light bulb, to just sit with that whole passage and go, hang on, this is the same chapter that has that incredible covenant promise at the back end that everyone knows, or the new covenant promise and all of that. But reading back through the chapter, it is sort of like what Matthew drops in as a footnote. For anyone who knows the story well, you can't help but have the truckload of the context come pulling in. And I think the analogy that came in my mind was like, for us, we've got movies like The Castle, and someone throws a line in, and straight away everyone else is like, oh yeah, da 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 da. So it only takes just dropping in the line to pull in the whole story. And I think the experience in, like, coming to Matthew almost feels like we're coming in as outsiders. Like, we're not Australians. We don't know The Castle. What are these quotes that you're throwing at me? I'm going to have to go and watch the movie now. And it's kind of like, we have to go back and sit in the Old Testament a bit more. So Jeremiah 31 was that. Hosea 11 as well. That was that the true Israel one. Out of Egypt I called my son. Like, the context of that, it is just talking about Israel and the Exodus. But then it pivots just to the shame of, God has loved like a father. I've loved you. I've called you, and you've wandered away. Like, it just pivots straight away to, God's grace for Israel's sin. And so it pulls that in, like the story of fulfillment in Matthew 2. For us reading it, Matthew's pulling on the fulfillment lever, that the context sends us back down the drain. It's salvation coming in the midst of, like, sorrow, tragedy, sin, rebelliousness. And I think, like, there's a step removed. Like, this is sorrow to Israel. Like, this is your salvation that's come. Hasn't come free. It hasn't come cheap. It's come in the thick of mess. The genealogy did that for us. This salvation has come in the midst of the mess and the sorrow and the sin, and grace is sort of shining brighter and brighter.
Like, even the journey, right? So he's born in Bethlehem, and Herod wants to kill him. Escapes to Egypt, and you go, all right, there's a long period of time that he spends in Egypt. Like, it grows up a bit in the context of Egypt. There's enough time for Herod to wipe out a generation of under 2-year-olds. There's enough time for Herod dying, his son taking over. He then comes back in. The thing that struck me was Matthew is telling this massive chunk of history, but he's only dedicating like 3 verses to it. So verse 13 to 15 covers Bethlehem to Egypt, back to Nazareth. And you go, it's important, here's the allusion, here's your homework, and let's get back to the story. And yeah, just the whole Easterly thing, right?
That was
Easterly.
Yeah,
Coming from the east.
Yeah.
My observation, and I could be wrong, right? But lots of the time when something's negative, it's coming from the east.
Yeah.
And even when it's Israel coming from the east, they're coming in judgment, and it's kind of like they're symbolic of God's wrath moving from east to west.
Yeah. Yes.
And so, as the Magi, I always have, whenever I see Magi, I think like
noodles.
Maggi 2-minute noodles. So it's like
the three noodles came into it.
I just imagine like they're wearing yellow with like a red badge on their thing. Goes on Magi. And, sorry, that's a distraction. No, so that's why whenever I go the wise men, it's to avoid my head going. Yeah.
We need to have those filters.
Yeah. So filter engaged.
Yeah.
Like the Magi come from the east, and my spider sense is that okay? Are they coming to bring judgment? Are they coming to bring wrath? What's going on for them? Are they just like the Babylonians come to take them away?
Yes.
Are we in a new pre-exilic period coming up?
Yeah.
What's going to go on when these these people coming from the east are arriving?
Yeah.
And so when they arrive with good gifts and then they side with Jesus, they go home a different way.
Yeah.
You go, oh, okay, this is different.
Yeah.
Is this the beginning of a different story than we've been used to in the past? And so I was like, oh, okay.
I love how you threw that open there. The story that jumped into mind, because you're right. Like we're used to it's the Christmas bit. The story of King Hezekiah in Isaiah 35 to 39 or whatever. King Hezekiah resists Assyria. They've come from the east.
Yeah.
They're knocking on the door, going like, "You're done for. God's not going to save you." King Hezekiah holds out, and he's like a real model of sort of the good kingship there, and resists Assyria in that moment. But then it's sort of the next chapter. This is the bit that came. Envoys from Babylon come from the east, bringing gifts, like as these little offerings. Hey, we're friends here. We're big bad Babylon, but you don't have to be crushed by us. We're on your team. We're going to look out for you. And that's the sort of awful moment. King Hezekiah welcomes them in. Come and see all of our treasures. And then it's just Israel are done for.
Game over.
Babylon have got their eyes on the gold, and they're going to steamroll Israel.
Yeah.
So when you open that up, bad things come from the east. I was sort of thinking, the lights are on, like flashing, danger. But how subversive. They're actually clued in on something here.
Yeah, so I reckon Matthew's putting his finger on something at that point, saying, I reckon Matthew's going, hey, this is a different story. The cycles of terrible that we've seen from Genesis 3 to Malachi is going to be different. Here's a different story. It's got a different trajectory. And, I don't know whether I'm just overreading it, but you kind of go, there does seem to be inversions of everything. So everything that you expect, the opposite happens. And so, like, for me, when the Magi arrive in Jerusalem and tell Herod that the King of the Jews has been born, I'm not shocked that King Herod doesn't like that. Like, kings don't like sharing power. And so I was like, that's fair enough, no worries. But what shocked me was all of Jerusalem were shocked with him. And so why are the people that should be waiting for their king and anticipating the Messiah, why are they shocked when these Magi arrive and say, born is the King of the Jews, where is he? We're here to worship. I expect Herod to be threatened. But the Jerusalem, all of Jerusalem is also threatened. And then the good old... what are they called? Teachers of the law, chief priests. The who's who of the Jewish leadership. Are asked by Herod, where is he? And they're like, Bethlehem. Totally Bethlehem. And you go, oh, okay, cool. And it doesn't say, and so all the chief priests and teachers of the law got on their donkeys and went to Bethlehem to worship the king.
Totally,
They went, there's radio silence. And so you go, why is the establishment of Israel, or at least the two tribes, like the Judah, the ongoing kingdom, why are they
so incurious about?
Yeah.
Yes. The historical thread that might be being pulled in, I'm not fresh on it all, but bloodshed, messianic pretenders and bloodshed have been in the near history of Israel at this point. I can't remember, but King Herod is not a nice, friendly king, right? Isn't his story, shadowed by acts of violence, like the slaughtering in Bethlehem? I don't take it is a out of character moment for a King Herod.
Yeah.
I wonder if the anxiety in the system in Jerusalem is we know what happens in Israel when messianic pretenders pop up.
Yeah.
We all get wiped.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true.
I feel like at that moment in history, at least early New Testament church in Acts era, you've got the Jews trying to have a crack at the Christians, and the way they do that is they appeal to the Romans saying, hey, we've got permission to worship. We've won that hard-fought permission to worship our way. They're not part of us. You should come down hard on them. And so, I wonder whether there is a bit of there's a political edge to the way, don't rock the boat. Let's maintain the status quo. We don't want to get, just remember, Herod, we're on your side. We fear you, earthly king, more than we fear God, our heavenly king. Maybe even he's been missing for 400 years. You're here, and if we annoy you, we know we certainly will die. But we've had generations pass since God last rocked up. We've got exile in our imminent memory. We've got the Romans in our imminent memory. And so, Messiah arriving, they may not have felt like good news to Jerusalem. But I was shocked. I don't really want to talk too much about Jesus' return in the future, because I think that's a one-way ticket to expending a lot of breath without getting anywhere in particular. If Jesus was to rock up again today or tomorrow, I think there'd be a lot of interest from Jesus' followers. There'd be a lot of people trying to figure out, is this actually the time that Jesus come back? If we have to ask the question, the answer is no. But I can sense, I feel like when I look at Jerusalem being fearful or grieved that the Messiah's arrived, I go, right, I don't think these guys are actually following God the way that they think they're following God. Because I think there should be a bit more curiosity of Jerusalem.
I guess just curious where we start to connect the dots, or even for you, where does this land in our heart, kind of thing? It's rich, it's so rich, and there's a joy in that. I think there's an expansiveness of it that, in a sense, kind of opens us up to God and the wonder of, wow, like you were mentioning, he pulls together all these threads, seemingly paradoxical or contradictory, and they all come together. I guess for your heart, where were you seeing some of this come together in terms of how you connect with God and your walk?
So I'm a pretty structured person, and so I like things to work in a particular way. And whilst I'm keen for the outcome to be right, I'm equally keen for the process to line up and be seamless as well. And so, Matthew 1:18 to 2:23 is a kind of corrective to that. It's not the ends justifies the means about how we get there, but God is in control even when there's seeming chaos. Which I'm like, I've got 4 kids, so I'm well acquainted with chaos. And so even when I'm like, man, everything's really tough, things aren't going the way that I want them to go, I'm anticipating things going better than they are. God's actually got a way of using that for good. So one of my favourite verses is Romans 8:28. All things work together for the good of those who love him. It's not all things feel good. It's all things work out for good. And there's a sense in which Matthew 1 and 2 give us this really clear indication of God working things out for good, even when they don't necessarily feel like it. So like Mary and Joseph having to go to Egypt for a couple of years, that's awfully inconvenient. Like moving house is the worst.
You might know something.
But moving house to another country, and I don't know how good their Egyptian language skills were. There's real visceral cost to Mary and Joseph. It's better than having their son killed, absolutely, but there's still like an inconvenience to that story. Where I go, God uses that inconvenience and pain for a good purpose to establish what He wants to happen. And that's tremendously encouraging for me. The other thing that I was kind of pondering was the Magi come from the east. Why are they coming from the east? Why are they chasing a star? I know lots of people like astrology, and they're like, maybe they're a Sagittarius, and the paper had written, follow your stars this month. But the Magi took the initiative to follow a star, and they connected the star to the promise of the King of the Jews being born. And so you go, is there a Jewish synagogue over where they live? Who took that prophecy to them? And sure, maybe from exile, maybe Daniel has something to do with it. I don't know. But somehow they've got a message. 600 years has passed, and they still are chasing. They don't just go, oh, look, a shooting star, that's pretty cool. They go, oh, maybe that's the messianic star that we need to follow. And get some gold and some frankincense and some myrrh, because we're going to give gifts and go visit this guy. It blows my mind that God is in control. And it makes me ponder and go, oh, was part of the reason that Israel got sent into exile establishing a prophecy so the Magi could come. And when they arrive, the reason they go to Herod is so they drive him into Egypt so that Jesus can fulfill the out of Egypt I called my son. And so I think I was just hit by God is in control of all things, even when it looks like they're completely no sense to what's going on. He's weaving his story through the evil of King Herod, the evil of his son, the slaughter of a whole generation of kids. These weirdos from the east that are coming in, chasing a star, and all of that works so that Jesus is the Messiah, irrespective of whether these guys rock up with sweet gifts. But he's actually stitching together all these prophecies from the past, all this beautiful, rich weaving of this tapestry of a story into Jesus being the Messiah. And Matthew's just spotlighting us onto that particular moment. So I'm just struck again by the bigness of God's promises. And so I go, whoa, I want to meet with someone at 2:00 on Wednesday. They're stuck in traffic. It's going to be 2:15. That's an irritation to me. But the dislocation of a people and moving people to Egypt and then coming back and landing in Nazareth, all these massive inconveniences are used by God to actually craft His story of redemption of mankind. And that hits me.
That's a good question of how, if Matthew is in some way pulling back the curtain and kind of showing us some of the machinery of how God's working, and get to see that and just sort of sit back in wonder, how does He do it? And yet, even then in the story, there's still a bit of mystery. We don't the curiosity about the men from the east. we still don't have the whole story on God and what He's doing, and I guess that sort of connects me as well back to that place of to come to Matthew 2 opens my eyes afresh to the bigness of God, the wisdom of God, and just sort of speaks into my life. All the times I'm prone to doubt or worry or wonder what on earth is going on. Matthew 2 kind of comes in with that assurance, this is the God that you follow. His hands are pretty good hands. He can do the job. And yet there is this ongoing mystery we don't know the full story of how he's working, and that only opens me up more, I think, to kind of wonder and be curious. What's God doing in our life, in our story, in our church, our city, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Any other ways that the passage is kind of speaking into your heart or life at this point?
I think because I've been sitting in, the thing I found interesting is, not to open them all up again, but three of the Old Testament quotes, Isaiah 7, Hosea 11, and Jeremiah 31, they all sort of land in the context of helpless Israel, who've tried all the means of security and safety and hope, and they've all failed, and God sort of entering the picture going, are you done playing games now? Are you going to trust me? I think just sitting in that space, the opposite side in the sense of the fulfillment piece is the really tangible sense of our utter helplessness to lift a finger to move ourselves closer to God. Like the I guess all the categories that are fleshing out something fuller about who Jesus is and something fuller about the salvation he's come to bring. It's not a two-dimensional salvation. It's incredibly rich. The opposite side of that is actually just reminding me he needed to be that because of who I am. And I guess I was speaking to my own tendency to, I like feeling competent in life and feeling like I'm capable at things, and I want to do things and do them well and go, yep, I've got it in me to do the job. But everything in Matthew 2, as I'm being positioned there, it's you need a savior. You are not capable and you are not competent. You need help. You need rescue. And I think just sitting in that place to go, that's a reminder for me of the fullness of God's salvation is percolating every part of my life, every place in my life where I'm tempted to lean on something else for security or safety or for hope or for joy. Jesus is entering that space to say, like, will you find your joy in me, your fulfillment in me, your hope in me? I am that and more. That's a beautiful picture of our Saviour to sort of sit with.
I find that beautiful that Jesus corrects the cycle, and so recognizing we need a saviour is the first step to actually being saved. Because if we don't recognise that we're sick or have a problem, then we are just going to keep digging the hole. And so that's beautiful. How Jesus breaks that cycle. He does actually show us by a good example. Like, we've had plenty of bad examples all the way through the Old Testament. But Jesus comes to give us a bar that we can never live up to, which helps us to see that actually, you know what, we need a saviour and we need to lean on God, and irrespective of how good we think we can be, we actually need to lean on him. That's beautiful. I guess, the only other thing for me is looking at Herod versus Jesus. The first part of chapter 2 is a tale of two kings, and you've got the earthly king with all the power and all of the might, and he's oppressing a whole nation, and he can wipe out a whole generation of under 2-year-old men. He is everything that epitomises earthly power. And then you've got Jesus the king, who is this defenceless baby that's getting ferried across vast amounts of land to Egypt and from Bethlehem to Egypt to Nazareth, and is he is the true king. He's the Messiah. He's the exile ender. He's all of those things that the passage makes the observation. But you watch chapter 2 unfold, and Herod, with all the power, is dead a couple of verses later, and Jesus rises to power in a completely different sense. Sure, he dies too, but he comes back to life at the end of Matthew's Gospel, and he sits on the throne and rules forever. And so it's kind of Herod's kind of short-term gain, long-term pain. Jesus is this short-term pain, and an eternal gain. And I think that for me, I'm often presented with opportunities to exercise human wisdom and human leadership and like skills that matter, and execute this skills-based earthly wisdom. But there's also an invitation there to actually rebuff that and go, you know what, I'm actually going to sit with godly wisdom and take the slow game. I really love how the Herod Jesus storyline, just in those few verses at the beginning of chapter 2, show us, hey, if you want to try and do the human thing, the human wisdom, the human understanding, the human power,
there's a game you commit to. There.
Go for it. Fill your boots. Oh, look, you're dead. How's that turned out for you? You don't take anything with you. Whereas, the path of Jesus, obedience to God, close, intimate, relational connection to God the Father. Sure, there's a painful story for a time, but there's eternal rest. There's eternal fellowship with God. And it's just a beautiful picture of the tale of two different paths. And so,
subversion of power.
I
incredible
love that.
Subversion of power.
And so I think, the encouragement for me there is, don't necessarily trust human wisdom. Don't trust human power structures. They're brittle. They will fail. And sure, you might get a short-term win out of them for a bit, but slow, long-term obedience to God, long, slow, long-term obedience to God, discipleship, fellowship is a place where something really beautiful happens, and it's something that's of eternal significance rather than going to pass away in a generation.
There's a call to the church. There's a call to leadership. And discipleship too.
So I'm loving spending time in Matthew, and I'd really like us to continue to be slow in how we read it. Not be afraid to pick up a commentary or Google an answer. Google's probably not the way to go, but get some assistance in reading it and follow, chasing the footnotes. So Jeremiah 31 is footnoted in most of the versions of the Bible out of the Rachel Rama quotes. And you can go and look at one verse and you go, oh yeah, I see why Matthew's saying this. But actually you read the wider context and you get this beautiful big picture. And so, if you're reading a passage and you're like, oh yeah, this will take me 2 minutes and 37 seconds to read. That's okay. But then chase your footnotes and actually let God colour in the picture of what Matthew's saying to us through the wider story.
That question live for upcoming weeks, where else is the exile thread being pulled in? Is he quoting from Isaiah maybe, just to keep the question live, because the genealogy framed exile, and then here we are in chapter 2. So or is this Son of God bit? Out of Egypt I called my son. Is the Son of God piece going to become significant? All of those things just start to set our expectation of what Matthew might be trying to unfold.
So I think it's just an invitation to stay curious. Let's be curious as we read through Matthew. Let's ask good questions as we read it, as we hear it preached, as we meet together in homes and read in growth groups. Let's stay curious.
Love that.